Hello, and welcome to the October 10th meeting of the Energy and Environmental Conservation Committee. As is the tradition of the committee, we'll introduce ourselves. I'm Matt Prinzing, the junior planner. Pass it to Kevin.
I'm Kevin Barry. I'm the liaison from the town board to the committee.
I'm Steve Daly. I'm a member of the committee.
Cheremeteff, member of the committee.
Pat Schichler, member of the committee.
Roy Green, committee member.
Katie Rygg, committee member.
All right. So we'll just go through the agenda here. First off, review and the approval of the minutes. Any comments or concerns about the minutes for September 12th?
I had two comments, actually, about the minutes from last time. Can I put them on the record?
Yeah.
One is a statement that was attributed to me. I probably said it, but if I did, I was wrong. It was on page 5, and there was a sentence where I basically said, and I'll have to look at the video, but it said that regulatory takings do not prohibit development or any other type of economic gain, and it went off. I would just strike that sentence because that's not an accurate statement of the law, and
Okay.
I would like to clarify the record on that.
Sure, I can do that.
And there's a reference in the minutes to also the next meeting date, which was incorrectly identified in those minutes as October 12th, but we're here on the 10th.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll make those adjustments. Beyond that, are there any other comments about the minutes? All right.
I move that the minutes be approved with the aforementioned suggestions or edits.
I'll second.
All right. Can I have a vote? Or
Aye.
Aye.
all right.
Aye.
All right. So with that, the minutes are approved. Moving into Cynette's standing report for the Monroe County Environmental Management Council. I'll just open those up here. Was everyone able to access this report on the Google Drive? Okay, good. All right. So yes, these are the meeting notes from the September 18th Monroe County Environmental Management Council. It was where they had focused on kind of the each of the municipalities kind of introducing the different projects or achievements from the year and what development planning or climate action plans, tree plantings they may be working on. I guess from the committee members, were any notes that you had that you thought was worth noting during our meeting here when you were reviewing them? No?
I just wanted to just state how impressed I am with the leadership of the students in, I think it's Honeoye, and I could be wrong with that, but no. Yes, Honeoye Falls, the local high school environmental club, is their workforce for their efforts for the Climate Smart Communities work. And it is just incredible to me what motivated students can accomplish.
Yeah.
So, bravo.
Yeah.
I would add that I really appreciated Cynette's summary, and I thought her notes were incredibly thorough and helpful.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I had taken some of the articles that were posted, the Sun King fire of lithium batteries, just in the case of like as we're reviewing renewable energy systems, just a thought of like, events that are occurring recently that may affect the standards or things that we consider when we're reviewing the renewable energy systems code. So yeah, again, appreciate Cynette's contribution for providing that, and her attendance at those meetings are greatly appreciated. With that, we'll move into the review of required items. So for town development projects, there is an application coming before the planning board in November. It's at, let me just pull up the map here so we can see the actual property that is being reviewed. It's 2520 Browncroft Boulevard. And it's approximately 1.46 acre parcel that would be subdivided from the Penfield Federal Credit Union 5.239 acre lot. Development will include construction of a 5,200 square foot dental office with access off Creek Street with associated parking and utilities. So the reason it's the planning board is sending it to EECC for review is because of the impact to the woodlot EPOD. So essentially, this is the lot that they are subdividing. The subdivision line is kind of skirting this tree line here, and ultimately the development is occurring on this portion of the lot. So as our woodlot EPOD is currently written, it's 10% disturbance to the entire woodlot EPOD. And so you have the woodlot EPOD expands across these three properties. And while it's estimated that 14% of the woodlot EPOD occurs on the new lot that's being created. Actually, let me pull up the site plan just to give an idea, better description of the area of disturbance that they're showing on their site plans. There you go. So ultimately, this is the EPOD boundary here. And they're showing a 50-foot improvement buffer setback. So they have snow fencing that'll be along here. And so you have this 50-foot buffer from the lot line to here that they're preserving the trees above that buffer line. So ultimately, and also I should note that on the plans here, they denote trees to be removed, denotes trees to be protected. There are trees within the woodland EPOD boundary that will be removed. This section here are trees that are be preserved. Ultimately, we're looking at a disturbance of less than 10%, given that they enforce the 50-foot setback and preserve the trees here, preserve the trees here, and the disturbance is limited to this area of the EPOD. It comes out to be about 9.2% disturbance to the overall woodlot EPOD. So again, just to clarify, staying below that 10%, they still have to get a woodlot EPOD permit, or really an EPOD permit, but the going beyond the 10% is what would trigger the mitigation requirements of the woodlot EPOD code as it's currently written.
And so it's 10% of the overall woodlot, but not of the subdivision piece.
Exactly.
But the way it's worded right now in our EPOD code, it's based off of the overall?
Yes.
Yes. So the current code is of the entire woodlot area. So this, going back to the map, it's this area.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We had discussed with staff and recommended that Katie be the lead since she's done some project review in the past, and then we'd have our two new members come in and have some introduction to the review process. And Katie, if you would rather have Pat kind of take the lead since she has more of that experience, we're totally fine with that. There's no limit to the number of EECC members that can be part of this review process. We really just chose 3 just because we don't want to overburden all of the members. And but would you prefer that, or?
I don't have a problem with that. You know, I already talked to, you know, and I saw your, you know, your email, and been there, done that, because I expressed how it was many times that I tagged along, participated in a review before I actually, you know, took the lead. And, you know, especially with that responsibility of working with new people, my thing would be is like, oh yeah, no problem doing that. You know, maybe somebody could take a stab at writing, like we did last time. Katie, you wrote it, and we reviewed it all together. So, no bad feelings. If you know, I mean, hopefully not. I mean, but use me if you want to. That's partly
Okay.
why I'm here.
Thank you, Pat, really, very much. I guess I've already looked through some of the application, just kind of glanced through things, and I could stumble my way through, I think, but I would like to be under. I would like to not be the lead.
Okay, all right.
I wouldn't mind doing it.
I was going to like, okay, spit it out, Stan.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting here.
We want your tutelage, Pat.
Okay, all right. So, I mean, such as it is, just bear in mind, you know, and it gives me a way to still feel useful, especially since I feel such a lacking on my part when it comes to reviewing RES and, you know, and other things along that nature. So, but if, you know, if you want to take your second stab at writing it up, and, you know, we worked together on the last time, and in terms of writing it up, we all make our comments, somebody's taken the notes, or we've all taken notes, and then after somebody does the stick man, or, you know, following our format, then send it out, and we all pipe in on with, I did it as, I don't know what you guys all use. I did it as Word and word changes, but I'm sorry, I'm a dinosaur.
I use Word too, so that's.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
But no, I'm happy to contribute in whatever way is we needed, whether it's drafting, whatever it is. Ready to jump in.
And I should mention, like, it'd be, if you want to review previous reports that the committees had, they're available on the Google Drive, so you can kind of take a look at the formatting that we've used and ultimately what reports we've submitted to the planning board. But ideally, so we're looking at having the committee go out into the field, reviewing this property with the site plans. I've got copies of that here. I printed copies of the plans that most directly show the subdivision and the EPOT boundary, the tree survey that they did. I should mention that if you haven't had a chance to look, they did do a tree survey at this point. They've shown which trees to be removed, which trees are to be preserved, and then if you decide that after reviewing you want printed copies of others, just let me know. But ultimately, we would hope that by the November meeting, this committee would be able to discuss it at the meeting, potentially approve it, and then pass it on to the planning board for their consideration. And it gets forwarded, the report gets forwarded to the planning board and the applicant, I should say.
So just for timing purposes, we would want to have site visit, complete our review, have the report in the committee's hands so that they have time to digest
A
it
week
in order to
before.
approve
Prior
it.
to- a
Right.
week.
So they needed a week before our meeting. So if our meeting's November, that's what I was told before.
For their meeting.
So the report doesn't go to the planning board.
Goes to you.
Well, it goes to the planning board after it's approved by this committee.
Right,
The
but
report can't be approved. outside of the meeting. It has to be done at our meeting.
Right.
So I would say that the report we would like for the report to be completed the week before your meeting so that the rest of the committee
Yeah, that's
can
what
look
I-
at it. Yeah,
that's
I'm
what I
sorry.
meant.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant that it needed to get sent to the planning
No,
board
no,
for their
no. We need
approval.
to send it
Or-
to you
Right,
a
yes.
week before
Exactly, and to
our
the-
meeting.
exactly, and to the committee so
So if we're November
that-
5th,
Right.
whatever that week before would be.
Yeah.
That Tuesday before at the latest. And so, and we can talk after this to set up a date. Actually, this is my backyard. I hadn't even looked at what the address was, but I live off of Creek Street, so.
And if 3 is enough, then maybe, and like I said, I've already kind of jumped in, so maybe either Steve or Ari could do the next one with being mindful of everyone's time, if 3 is a good number.
I think they would be helpful if they both started, because it's like, you know, I think it's the more you do it, you seem to retain a little bit more every time, and it's certainly you know, that would be my, you know, obviously you can take, gee, I'm surprised I'm not dragging Roy in too, because I was going to say, he's been to one, he's already had some
I
good
have time
experience.
constraints right now, so no.
Okay, so we can talk afterwards when to meet, and it's going to be a heck of a lot, especially with a tree inventory, and, you know, heck of a lot easier than where we couldn't set a foot into this other property. What buildings are nearby, just to give me some reference? You said, I know there would be
It's
an,
behind the Fast Track, the gas
Yeah,
station on
so
the
you
corner
have-
of Creek and Browncroft.
Oh.
Right,
It's right, it's that parcel right behind it.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
there's a dentist's building.
Oh, yeah,
We
I'm
have
very
The
familiar.
Silver Maple Dentist.
okay, very, very familiar with that.
Yeah, so I would think that access is going to be easiest from Creek Street rather than trying to go from the credit union property coming through this way.
Is there a curb cut already onto Creek Street, do you know?
No, there is not.
Okay. And they are recommending one?
Yes, so that's where.
One
the-
more on Creek Street, okay.
There's a lot
Yeah,
of
so
traffic right there, too.
It is. Is it
that
near
light
the restaurant, all the restaurant curb cut? I mean, I'm not good relationship-wise where these,
I mean,
I'll go home and
if I
check it
go
out
back to
tonight.
that. Ultimately, the curb cut is, I believe, it's ultimately kind of in this area.
Where's Plank on this?
Plank?
Look, Plank cuts across Creek.
It's much more north.
Much further north. Yeah, it's
Oh,
the
okay.
intersection of Browncroft and Creek. Or, sorry. yeah.
Browncroft.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
where Blossom,
Or,
excuse
Oh,
me,
it's the
Blossom
other, it's
turns
the other
into Creek on
side,
the other
okay.
side.
so you have Creek
okay.
Street.
Oh, Fast
and-
Track. I was
yeah,
thinking of the
so
other
this,
place.
Yeah, if we zoom out,
Okay,
Yeah.
you're on the opposite end. So Plank's
Okay.
all the way up here, Browncroft's down here. Yeah.
okay, I've got you now. I was so happy when GPS came out.
So I know we have been tasked with evaluating kind of their application regarding this particular woodland E-pod, but I wondered if there was any room for recommendations just in terms of other sustainability in developing this plot of land. Is there,
So the EPOD review process is, it's on behalf of the planning board, or really the board having jurisdiction delegates that to EECC for this particular case of reviewing the EPOD and ensuring that any development is compliant with the EPOD code. And that's one of the duties that's delegated to this committee by the town board. At this time, I don't know if that's really something that the committee has been delegated by the town board. And in terms of like those specific, like when you had mentioned in your one email about sidewalks along the property, or trying to suggest or recommend active transportation, accessibility, things like that. Those are suggestions that are brought about in other portions of our code, and the planning board already encourages. We have a sidewalk policy. This particular property would be required to either install sidewalks or get a sidewalk waiver from the town board. So for that particular one, in terms of EV chargers, this particular property falls into the area where the Monroe County Developmental Review Council reviews it, and with a development like this, they would recommend, or they basically provide information about the benefits of EV chargers. And again, it's not a requirement in the review that they have to have EV chargers, but they cite the benefits of EV chargers. So while I would think that this particular review is going to stay within the boundaries of trying to ensure compliance with the EPOD code, I can assure you that there are other means that the planning board is using to encourage sustainable practices, as well as the Monroe County Developmental Review Committee. So
Thank you very much for that explanation, Matt.
you're welcome.
You know,
Yes.
I think one of the basic things is we've always had a very narrow focus in going in on these, but with the expanded duties of this committee, it comes up. But, we've said a comment about, watch out for, traffic, things like that. And no matter what we say, Matt and Sarah, in other words, whatever changes and edits we do on each other, there'll be something else that comes after.
And I think an important thing to note here is that the only projects that get deferred to this committee are ones that are impacting EPODs. And what this committee, I think, would really want to know is that the town is encouraging sustainable practices on all properties. And so while this one project, it seems apparent that there are sustainable practices that they could enforce. And when it comes to any project, whether there's an EPOD there or not, there are processes that the town, or there's development standards that the planning board, Monroe County Developmental Review Committee, that they promote. So while this committee, may advocate for, different development practices that are more sustainable. If we're only looking at a subset of those projects to encourage sustainability, I think that that wouldn't be the most effective way. We try and do that for all projects that are coming before the planning board in that way. So,
Great.
yeah,
Thank you.
I think that essentially covers. I think you also had a question about who determines that the soil sustainability or soil stability is stable, that the rate of surface runoff will not be impacted, and that the woodland EPOD only supports habitat for transient wildlife. So those were comments that you had pulled from the factors for consideration, correct? And so those are determined by the project engineers, or essentially who's contributing to the application. And in terms of determining the EPOD supporting habitat for transient wildlife, or determining what wildlife utilize that is determined mostly during the seeker review process. And they'll do, in this particular one, they do a short form seeker, and they'll put in where the site, where projected developmental area will be, and they're given a review of what species may be there. And generally, it only turns out if there's any protected or threatened species in that area. And so in their seeker, in their short form, it didn't turn up any of those species, but they did mention the potential for there to be habitat for transient wildlife, which, I think that's just a general nature of a woodlot area. And so, and then in terms of soil stability and surface runoff, that's typically a project engineer or a professional certified engineer makes that determination and then provides that in their factors for consideration report. So,
Thank you, Matt.
yeah. So any other questions about this particular town development project? All right, and again, I'll provide the paper copies, and if there's anything else you need from me, just let me know. There's no requests from the town board at this time. Clean energy community actions. There are some items to discuss, but they're further on in the agenda, so I'm just gonna pass through that one, and we'll move into Renewable Energy Systems Code. I'll just say that I really appreciate everyone's contributions throughout this process. This is, I wouldn't say novel. I mean, we're able to pull a lot of model codes and cite a lot of standards from the state and national level for safety and things like that. But yeah, I really appreciate everyone contributing to this and helping us develop this. So at the last meeting, Cynette had commented kind of how this first section under applicability seemed a little confusing to her. So we went in and just added that it's any RES lawfully existing prior to the effective date of this section shall be deemed nonconforming and shall be treated as pre-existing nonconforming structures / uses under this chapter. And in the town code, we have a portion of the code that deals specifically with non-conforming structures. That's 250-7.13. And so it is this version of the applicability make more sense. I know that Cynette's not here to attest to that, but does anyone else have any concerns about this particular portion of the code?
Can you make it a little bigger?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, it was this shall be treated as pre-existing non-conforming structures / uses under this chapter. All right? Okay. So, just pop it here. And then we changed this portion. I mean, truly, the building permit, this is exactly what the wording is, where a building permit is required if electrical wiring is installed, altered, or repaired on systems operating on 50 or more volts. So technically, this is already a requirement. It doesn't need to be in the code, but it makes it very explicit for somebody that is trying to understand whether or not they need a building permit to install their RES. It's very clearly when there's that electrical wiring being installed. Yeah, so there was some confusion, and lot coverage is a tricky item that we deal with constantly with trying to understand or describe it to developers. So this was something that town staff really wanted to add in, was a definition of lot coverage, and understanding that lot coverage is essentially impervious area, impervious surfaces. And so there are certain zoning districts where we don't enforce a maximum lot coverage. If you can think of some of our very relatively small residential zoning districts, like R112, where you have a 12,000 square foot property, or that's the minimum size. If you were to enforce that 65% impervious area, a lot of those properties would be non-conforming anymore. And so ultimately we're deferring to lot coverage shall comply with the overlying zoning district. And so if you're considering installing your renewable energy system on your lot, you're subject to those requirements of the overlying zoning district. So if it's in that residential, very dense residential area, you'd be subject to those restrictions specifically. So if you don't have that lot coverage requirement, you're not subject to that. Any questions or concerns about that? I think the main thing is that we thought at first that it would be important to enforce that and ensure that these areas aren't being overdevelopment or being, adding too much impervious surfaces. But at this time, if we're not enforcing it for a shed that's going in on another accessory structure, and we're arbitrarily choosing to do that just for RES, then that may not be, enforceable may just make it difficult for the town to enforce the zoning code. Does that make sense? We're good with that? All right.
Yes.
All right. So, Ari, with
I saw it later when I,
No,
yeah, I
yeah, that's
forgot to
fine.
mark that. It's sufficiently,
great.
yep.
All right.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure I'm not skipping it. Yeah, that's all dealing with that. Decommissioning plans. So this was definitely something that we went back and forth on in determining which specific renewable energy systems we were going to require decommissioning plans for. Staff is recommending that we require decommissioning plans for Tier 3 SES, Principal Use WES, Principal Use BES, and EVCS Tier 3. And I guess that through the comments, we've kind of discussed how we determined those ones specifically needing those decommissioning plans because, I mean, there's the factor of scale, but just the understanding that the decommissioning plan is the plan in order to dispose of it and return that land use back into how it originally was. And for a Tier 1 EVCS, which is essentially a charger that plugs into a standard outlet, it didn't seem appropriate for there to be a decommissioning plan, but say a Tier 2 SES, ground-mounted solar, how do we determine that that one doesn't need a decommissioning plan where the larger scale does? And ultimately, we were further when Cynette was voicing her concerns about, if in that case, if I bought a home that has this abandoned Tier 2 SES, this ground-mounted solar, who's responsible for it? Do I have to take care of it? And essentially, it's the same as if you purchase a property and there's an abandoned shed on it or anything like that. So that's kind of how we're treating. We're trying to ensure that we're not being overburdensome and requiring these decommissioning plans for these relatively small scale renewable energy systems. And so those larger ones, specifically the ones cited there, were requiring that those decommissioning plans be submitted. And yeah, is there any other comments, or do we want to address this any further? Or does anybody need further clarification on why we are not requiring them for certain renewable energy systems?
And how do we define the decommissioning plan?
It's a great question. So we're in the process of defining that in the town's design and construction specifications. And if you recall, we also had some recommended changes, or really we asked if the landscape consultant could modify our recommended plant listings. This was sometime in the last year, so it may not sound too familiar, but so we're really looking at a more comprehensive update to that document, which will include the decommissioning plan. But ultimately, where I would imagine that information is going to come from is that we're going to take a model code of what is required for a decommissioning plan and have that involved in or introduced into the town's design and construction specifications. So again, it's being drafted, but it's not necessarily part of the current town's design and construction specifications.
Yeah, I'm just thinking considerations for what happens to the materials that you end up taking out. And I know it's not easy to say that everything needs to be recycled because not everything can be, but
Sure.
as much as can be recycled should be. And
Okay.
those considerations need to be included in that decommissioning plan.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I can add that as a comment on our running draft for the design and construction specifications. But yeah. Any other comments on this portion of the code?
Well, some of that would fall under, if it's batteries, that there's already strictures on how to dispose of, I mean, if it was something that involved one of those batteries?
Yeah, and I mean, especially if you're talking about a large, a principal use battery energy storage system. Yeah, that's going to be something that we'll have to consider the requirements from state and national level, and I'm not too sure of how much we'll be able to designate on our end, because it's something that's heavily regulated, because there's just like, oh, sorry, Harry.
No, decommissioning plans are typically prepared by the owner's engineer, and they're submitted to the board, and then the board reviews it and makes comments.
But are those decommissioning plans subject to standards at the...
There are certain standards of, yes, but there's also some leeway of how the material's disposed and what happens with it.
Okay.
So it's really a matter of them providing that document and then the board reviewing it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I guess in that sense we can continue to draft that and ensure that those renewable energy systems are properly disposed of and decommissioned, and use the best information we have available to make those determinations. And the fact that those requirements aren't being written into the code allow us to, in the same way that the forestry plan, where we had decided that there were certain things that, if we left it to be included in the forestry plan, it's more malleable as opposed to the town code, which, it's cumbersome to try and modify the town code as compared to a document such as the design and construction specifications.
So this conversation got me thinking about something else as well.
Sure.
And so as these renewable energy systems come online and they get put into place, they're going to be one of the largest sources of carbon pollution, because there are more of them going to be coming in. So there's a lot of embodied carbon in, for example, silica that's used in, glass and those sorts of things for solar, and a lot of embodied carbon in minerals and mining that occurs in, let's say, for rare earth minerals that go into batteries and battery systems and those sorts of things. And I know we can't fix that particular problem per se, but is there a way we can encourage people to consider the embodied carbon of the materials that they're using in the renewable energy systems somewhere in this code?
I guess I'm open to suggestions on how we could address that.
Is there a section you would think that we could maybe look at? I can draft some language around that, but where would it fit is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. It sounds like something that would be a general requirement that would apply to all of the renewable energy systems.
We can't really force people to choose one over another, but just making the mention of it sometimes is enough for people to consider it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just bring to their forefront and be aware.
A lot of that is market driven too, though, right? It just comes down to the consumer and the developer of the system, whether it be residential or commercial level.
So you're saying that, it's a consumer choice. It's like a consumer choice, what company to go with. And
Yeah, but
what
a lot of
product
that's
to use.
price driven too, and a lot of the materials are very
wouldn't
similar.
Codify that.
Yeah, you're right. Can we codify that? I don't know.
I don't think it would be appropriate to codify it. I think that where that potentially could live is in the design and construction specifications, namely because there are examples where in those specifications we cite best practices, best materials, but in the case with tree plantings, we specifically cite native plantings that are preferable. And so I think that that's a case where it could be referenced that certain materials for renewable energy systems are not as sustainable as others and could be considered.
That's a good
But
idea.
that means Roy could still draft something, because you could use it for that other section, right, or no?
No, yeah, and information for that would be greatly appreciated, just to for consideration for those recommended changes for the those specifications.
In your spare time?
Yeah, right.
I can draft something, that's no problem, but I'm just thinking, like, I've done large RFPs where we use point systems and we give a criteria on the embodied carbon of the materials that were going to be used for the project, and that scored points versus cost and other things. And here, obviously, it's not that because it's a code, but your design construction specification piece, I guess we could put something in there that maybe looks at or gives examples of, you know, if the solar panels are coming from China, yeah, they may be super cheap, but you're also potentially getting a lot more carbon emissions, depending on where they came, you know, how they were shipped and stuff. But
Didn't the IRA try to address that, like, so that the financial incentives would reward good? Okay.
they did, the Inflation Reduction Act
Yes.
did do that. And, you know, that is one of those things where it's also trying to push for American manufacturers,
Right.
which is great, and that's doing it at the government incentive level. And separate from this town code, it might be great at some point if the town of Penfield had some sort of incentives that they could provide, grants potentially, or, you know, things that the people, if it, you know, can get awarded to greenify their renewable energy systems.
Yeah, it's a worthy note. And I think that at least some call out to it in the design specifications could be done. At least will be discussed among town staff as we continue to draft it. I don't know where it could live or how we would potentially codify that, or if we're really at a stage where we would, But it's just something we haven't considered up until this point of incentivizing any portions, whether it's this or any other portions of renewable energy systems in our code. So yeah, I can have that note and we can continue to discuss that. Yeah, are there any other items, particularly on decommissioning here, that we want to discuss? All right, I just want to make sure that we kind of hit on all those points. Yeah, that's just adding that in. So at first, Steve, when I saw this, I thought that it was a good contribution, and it aligned with that initial, if we go back to the general requirements, where we call out that, intended to encourage renewable energy systems in a way that promotes the health, safety, and welfare of the public and is compatible with surrounding land uses. I think that when we introduced this change to town staff, the particular call out to negative impacts and kind of associating that with surrounding land uses, because one of the challenges with adopting or developing renewable energy systems of these types that we're proposing to allow is that oftentimes surrounding landowners think that the visualization or just seeing a wind turbine or any of these renewable energy systems negatively impacts their properties. And so we wanted to, we didn't want to open that sort of interpretation in this portion of the code, especially when ultimately the intent, it has some substance, but ultimately it's not, anything that, it's essentially fluff. It's citing the intent of it, but it's not anything that we're ultimately enforcing, or it's not a requirement of the code. So that's where we thought to strike it. I mean, I'm open to potentially changing the wording of this so that it's not stating negative impacts. Maybe we go back to the phrasing of the original general requirements, where we call out that it's to promote the safe, healthy, health, safety, and welfare of the public and is compatible with the surrounding land uses, so that we're more citing just compatibility rather than citing that it essentially can't have negative impacts on surrounding land uses, because we don't want to open it up to that sort of scrutiny of any negative impacts to my property, and it shouldn't be, the renewable energy system shouldn't be allowed to be approved, or that kind of language. Does that make sense? Or
So your explanation is helpful. I mean, a couple of reactions on my part. One is virtually most of this code is about compatibility with surrounding land uses. Like
Yeah.
if you look at each of those subparts, there's very little actually about reducing impacts on environmental resources.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I guess to me, my reaction is, do we even need specific intents for each RES? And if we do, then I would track it to the overall general intent statement at the top that you just pointed to.
Yeah.
Because that to me, because I think when you have separate intents broken out for different RESs, then that to me can be confusing in a code.
Sure.
Is it about compatibility with surrounding land uses, or is it reducing negative impacts on environmental resources? So to me, I would go back to tracking the most general intent and just keeping that consistent throughout the document so we can avoid the issue.
All right. Yeah, I'll make that note. And I think that's the most effective way. I think the only intent that's significantly different from any of the others is EECC, only because EECC has such a broad spectrum of what the actual impact on surrounding land uses would be, because it's essentially just being plugged into a standard outlet, or it's this pretty large development of EV chargers that has a lot of energy uses and things like that. We can kind of go back and relook at the intents on these and make them, as you said, more consistent with that general intent. With that, we only have 12 minutes left, and we didn't make a big dent in here, unfortunately, but we'll continue to have this open for comments, but I do want to get through the rest of the agenda at this point. There's some key topics that we need to get through. So we'll table this for now. The hope is that if we can get through these comments, potentially through the November meeting, and then the town board potentially could have a public hearing on it in December, and then it really would shape up that potentially could be before the town board, from my understanding, for approval maybe in February, just because the January meeting is typically it's full of a lot of administrative duties that the town board is addressing. So we greatly appreciate your contributions and your comments so far. I'll continue to make suggested edits, and hopefully at that next meeting in November, we can hammer out a lot of these final details on this. So again, moving on, town sustainability webpage updates. We had recommended that there be some updates to the sustainability webpage, and while we haven't directly addressed that yet, we're still compiling the suggested edits that we want to that specific sustainability page. But what we did update was the Clean Energy Communities page. I just want to pull that up. I know that I can get to it from so the Clean Energy campaign page. This is all new, and really it's the best mode for residents to contribute to our clean energy campaign by submitting their materials directly to town staff. So they submit their full name, zip code, email, phone number. They have to be a Penfield resident in order to contribute to this program, and then they provide an invoice for electric vehicle or proof of installation for a heat pump or for your heat pump or electric vehicle. And ultimately, we're able to use this information to contribute to our clean energy campaigns. So this was something that Sarah got done since our last meeting, and we're hoping that, if not by next meeting, by the December meeting, we have more of a draft of what we'd like to see for the updates to the sustainability webpage.
Is there any like news or events that leads us as residents to this?
So the EV 101, Your Guide to Electric Vehicles, that is one of the Clean Energy Campaign events where residents can come and learn about the opportunities and the incentives to purchasing EVs and how those purchases could contribute to the Clean Energy Campaign.
Color Penfield Green also partnered with the town to create a full-page ad that will be running in all of the 2025 Parks and Rec brochures.
Oh, great.
That people can QR code to this page.
Yeah, that's more what I was meaning, like how do we know about this?
Sure.
As residents, just is it available information? Is it advertised? Something, you know?
Yeah, I'd say that's.
And if they're not
so
watching
far-
this right now.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
I just want to mention that it says heat pumps, geothermal systems, electric vehicles. I do think that we should specify heat pump water heaters, since
Okay.
it does, like heat pump dryers, I don't think those count, but heat
Okay.
pump water heaters do. So
Okay.
I think that should be added.
All right. Yeah, I can bring that back to Sarah and the website team and make that suggested edit.
Thank you.
What about air source heat pumps? Do those apply?
Yeah, the yeah, so heat pumps is, yes, that's assuming air source, I think, because geothermal comes next, but maybe that should be explicit.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing too is that this information goes directly to town staff, and so if we realize that something isn't qualifying, or even if it's somebody that's not a resident, or if there's anything at issue with this, we get a reply from town staff to the resident. We have all their contact information because of this form, and we can ask any clarifying questions or ensure that we get more clarifying information to ensure whether or not it is a qualifying purchase or installation. So, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. I can't take any credit for it. It was all Sarah and the website team. So, yeah, so that's the Town Sustainability website updates. EPOD code, with the time that we have, we're going to just table that, but I just wanted to state for the record that at our last meeting, there was a comment from town staff where it was addressed that the interpretation of the town staff member was that the revisions to the EPOD code were driven by a developer's concerns, and the town attorney wanted to just clarify, and town staff wanted to apologize for misspeaking and clarify that it was the town attorney's concerns. He was brought to the attention that the code was not being enforced entirely to the letter of the law, and so we wanted to bring the code into more conformance and make it more enforceable, and that is what's driven these EPOD code updates. And so, yeah, just wanted to clarify that on the record in our public meeting so that everyone's aware that it's the town attorney's motivations that are driving that change. And so, yes, we'll continue tabling that and address any further comments or revisions at future meetings for EPODs. Moving into upcoming events, the EV 101. Katie, if you want to just briefly describe that, I can also pull up the...
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
So this is a hybrid class offered by Color Penfield Green in partnership with the Town of Penfield for the Clean Energy Communities campaign. We're running it in the afternoon as well as in the evening. It's a two-part class. The first part is on October 17th, and if you register for any of it, we can provide the resources and the recordings and a slide deck with clickable links. So it takes you through, why you would want to get an electric car, does go through hybrids as well as full battery electric, and then, pros, cons, common questions, and then the second class gets into case studies and of Penfield residents and how they have enjoyed their EVs and plug-in hybrids.
I appreciate that, Katie. And yeah, so those dates are here in the Penfield brochure, Penfield recreation brochure for anyone that needs to refer to that information later on. Yeah, so that's one of the, referencing back to those clean energy community actions and the clean energy campaigns that contributes, and people can go to that clean energy campaign website again and cite their information or submit any of that information to contribute to the campaign there.
Katie, these have been offered before, right?
Yes.
Have you anecdotally heard anything about it spurring people to make a purchase there or along those lines?
I think people come to these classes kind of thinking that it could be in their future, and so it's hard to know if
Okay.
we push them
Well,
over or not.
tipped them over. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I can say that since this form's been on, we have received a few submissions from residents, and it'd be interesting now to see that we'll have these classes and see if we get
See
any
if
more
there's a bump.
submissions. So yeah, just kind of making, I think between offering the classes obviously is a huge part of the campaign, and it's the main part of it, but also having this now to really direct residents directly to how they can contribute directly to the town's efforts for the campaign. But,
Yeah, I'm really excited about the brochure, though. I think.
Oh, yeah, and that too.
Thousands
Excellent,
of
yeah.
people are going to be looking at that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I'm hoping for a big bump there.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming the brochure that refers them to the site as well? Is that, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last, or I guess we have the other upcoming event, Introduction to Land Use Law and Secret Training on October 30th. The registration is still open. I think right now we just have Katie, Ari, and Cynette were interested. Is anyone else available to go? No?
If I can attend, I'll go.
Okay.
It's the day before Halloween, which,
Sure.
I don't.
Costumes should be done the week before.
Yeah, I
don't
was
know.
thinking about that, but you have to register and pay, and, you would pay in advance
Yeah,
for our
the
part,
town
so.
would be able to pay for your attendance through
Okay.
the committee's budget. And so, yeah, that portion we can't, but that's why we'd like to know a little bit before in advance so we can prepare and get everybody registered before that 21st. But yeah, if you want to let us know a little bit closer to that date, whether or not it'll be available, that's totally fine.
Yeah, do you, well, I saw that they were thinking about making legal continuing education credit for it. Do you know if that was approved or not?
I
Or
believe it is.
It was approved?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Well, then
It's
that
on
would
the
be
website,
helpful
it
to me.
shows
Okay, I'll follow up.
All right, that's great.
I've taken it before, it could use a refresher, I suppose, but I'll say I have to check my schedule.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I'll follow up with the committee. And then other new business, Cynette asked if I could actually follow up with the town's fall recycling event and get any data. They don't have that right now, but they should by our next meeting. Basically, we had that recycling event where people could bring in materials to the town hall, and they get the information about how many materials were recycled from the recycling vendors. They don't quite have that yet, but by the next meeting we will, hopefully. But yeah, beyond that, is there any other new business items that anyone wanted to discuss at this meeting? No? All right. It's 6 o'clock on the dot. Appreciate everyone's contributions to the meeting. I will call this meeting adjourned.